But how many times in like a year do they do this stuff? Once a year, every June. Is it I don't even know, is it an organization or just it's
Yeah, I know.
or like just a group of scholars that are coming together?
Yeah, it's just like an association of people. You have to be a member. There is, for instance, I can be a member of membership. So most of these projects in the membership. So like this guy's yeah. I think I remember when they say ah, oh boy. Yeah, I'm gonna remember it. Online, to speak clearly. I don't know what's that happened last. I think well, supposed to manage what the directions. Everybody know. Why do you know that? This is probably I wanted to volunteers. Yeah. And try to do yes. Are you trying to tackle or just here? Okay, so apparently there's a conflict in terms of the location of this panel. There are two different things. One of them says B30 something, 308. Somebody needs to be stationed there to direct people to come here.
Well, the flip class will be.
Huh?
We have everybody is going to conference. We have the card. Like change direction. Like if you're coming down, they see the car.
If somebody is looking for this session and they see B308, if they go to B308, how will they know to come to down 3 floors to G02?
Okay, B308. B308. That is 300 from the section.
That's what I just heard. There's a version of the schedule that has different rules.
On the soft copy, it's that B3. But on the physical copy,
somebody needs to be there.
There was the what's the they did the final copy.
Okay, somebody needs to be there.
There's another section going on there.
Somebody needs to direct people. Somebody needs to direct people. You guys don't. There's nothing to argue. You just need somebody to be there to go and direct people.
Everybody's all hands on deck now, and this is the final section. So we know we need to figure out that's what happened. So I will need to drop the message.
That would be nice if we can do that. Hello, Sharon. I'm a session that's starting with schools. And there is a version of the schedule out there that is the same session. I think maybe I even do several things. Very if you come upstairs. So bitch. Which if you have that copy, that copy should for the medicine, but second.
Yes.
And how was that narrative in school? This is there. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's still there.
But this one, if you don't. There is one, one of the big solutions was. To go back, and taking me back, so this is what's out of here. I think one next. So the section is about to start. Panelists, you're one of the panelists. Please have a seat.
Yeah. This is G. Yes.
Think of the panel here. So we should have this now. Then I
How many others?
I'm not first. I need to get going. Let's not say any guys. Yeah, so you got that. Yes. Come on, just click on that. If you have your slide, let us have it.
Yeah, fair.
Okay, so
I think this is just the sharing.
send.
Is it the one sharing the finance?
This Sojourner. Don't share that. Just so you can share in the absence of that. Can don't share. Okay. Okay, no, we are. No. Is he also presenting? Good afternoon, sir. Can you hear us, sir?
Yes, I can hear you guys. Thanks.
Maybe if you chair the panel while waiting for other people to join us, sir.
They have a share. And they go to share.
Yeah.
Can you text it, please? Yes. Because if I just read that they're walking over. Or if they went to the POAs, and they're coming down the stairs.
Is it here physical or online?
See if they come to that.
Okay. On the paper, that's where the real venue is. Or on the soft copy, I think there was an adjustment. No, so we won't waste much time. This is the second thing. G. Yeah, he said you already informed that. That's what it is. Security is my son. Going on. Sure. So, beautiful. Oh,
Not gonna.
you did my best. It's like it's not quite.
No, no.
I know this shit, but okay. How they between myself. Shit. I was yes. I will try to shit. I killed basically what I should give just a lot of that experience.
Okay, I'll do it.
Okay.
Hey, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to this session of Authors and Leaders. The book we are here to discuss today is Diasporas and Ethnic Identities in Africa, the Ekue among the Northeast Yoruba, 1485 to 1995, by Professor Uyilawa Usuanlele. My name is Abosede George. I am substituting for the chair on the program, Paul Akin Otiko. I'm also going to present. My other fellow presenters are Frank Ikon from the University of Benin, who is maybe joining us later. Olatunji Ojo from Brock University. Oreoluwa Ogun Tomisin from University of Ilesha. And Abimbola Oyarin from Olabisi Onabanjo University. Formerly of Olabisi Onabanjo University. The presenters will give their reflections on the book, and then we will have a response from the author who is present with us in the room, Professor Usuanlele from the State University of New York in Oswego. And then after that, we will open up for a broader discussion with the members of the audience. Okay, so let's start with Professor Ojo, who is on screen while we have a good connection.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks to the organizers. Let me start with two quick disclaimers. I read this book in one of its early drafts, so some of what I'm going to be saying today, I think I've said them before. Second, I never got a copy of from the publisher, so I'm only reading. I only read the galley copy, so I hope that the copies and the pages are the same thing. So I'm gonna start. Having said that, let me start this way. The resurgence of human migrations, both forced and voluntary, within and beyond Africa, in recent decades has reopened the debate on the nature of ethnic diasporas. After World War II in Europe and North America, the discourse began with trying to understand the fate of millions of Jews. Can you hear me?
Yes, please just rewind to your first lines. Thank you.
Okay. The resurgence of human migrations, forced and voluntary, within and beyond Africa in recent decades has reopened the debate on the nature of ethnic diasporas. After World War II in Europe and North America, the discourse began with trying to understand the fate of millions of Jewish people in Europe and the fallout of World War II. This meant delving into the past, examining the histories of population displacements and the concept of an original homeland. whether it's physical or emotional. Africanist scholars, mostly anthropologists, cultural historians, have since joined the debate, forced to examine the survival of African cultures in the Americas and in the last 30 to 40 years to understand the legacies of the transatlantic slave trade. What is a diaspora? How do we best study or understand it? Its structure. What are the areas of cooperation and engagements between the diaspora community and the host, as well as between the diaspora community and its original homeland? Let me start with basic definitions. Diaspora, what is it? Diaspora comes from a Greek word that means dispersion. In other words, it's a study of people living outside the so-called original homeland. It entails the movement of community beyond its homeland, as well as engagements between the diaspora and the host community, as well as contacts with the homeland. Increasingly, diaspora studies are now being cast as transnational studies because they raise questions such as, where is the home? Should it be one place? And is it always attached to a territory? I will return to these questions later. Diasporas and ethnic identities in Africa, the Ekue among the Northeast Yoruba, 1485 to 1995, takes on some of these questions, focusing on a neglected aspect of the history of Benin/Edo people. The book was a pleasure to read, beautifully written, well conceived, and largely executed. I'll come to the qualification later. It explores the migration of Edo people and the birth of their communities in northeastern Yoruba land. And by northeastern Yoruba land, as conceived in the text, it's largely, we're talking about the northern part of current Ondo State and the southern/western areas of modern Ekiti State in Nigeria. As is correctly claimed, the history of this community, that is Ekue, has been neglected, whereas this book integrates a wide range of cultural, political, ethnic, religious, geographical, economic, and biographical aspects into the rise, development, decline, and resurgence of this specific community. The book, therefore, for me, represents a very useful addition to global literature on diaspora studies. In doing so, it is groundbreaking. The book covers nearly 6 centuries, the late 1470s till the late 1990s. It details changing relationships between Benin and northeastern Yoruba land through personal stories and events, and their changing interpretation by scholars and traditions. It argues convincingly that the decline of Ekue was the inevitable result of British imperialism and post-colonial politics in modern Nigeria. The book offers a good reassessment of an African kingdom, Benin, its expansion and emergence as a regional power on the eve of European encounter with West Africa in the late 15th century. In this sense, it's more than a book on Edo diaspora. It's indeed the history of Benin Kingdom, and therefore nicely complements and builds on existing works by Jacob Igarba, Robert Bradbury, Alan Ryder, Philip Igbafe. At its peak, Benin had a strong economy and produced rich works of art, many of which are scattered across the world today. Also, it had a powerful army deployed in foreign wars to conquer and colonize territories. From about the 15th to the 17th century, Benin was the most dominant state in what later became southern Nigeria. Such was its power and influence that it gave its name to a good part of West Africa called the Bight of Benin. The expansion of Benin power and influence entailed military conquest and population outmigration. Benin populated its colonies by exporting soldiers, traders, envoys, and their clients, as well as captives taken in foreign wars, foreign wives, and workers. Many of the diasporic community, specifically of Ekue, were also merchants and privateers working in private roles. Hence, they were found mostly in towns and villages along major trade routes, connecting Benin to Oyo and Nupe. The members traded in Yoruba products, food crops, cotton, ivory, animal products, captives, beads, cowries, and after 1470, distributed European imports such as salt, firearms, and metals. What came first? What emerged was a classic case of a trade and political diasporas. What came first, or is it of primary importance? It's difficult to understand. Was it a trade or the politics? The biggest concentration of Ekue, that is Edo of Akure, that's actually the meaning. But Ekue was more than Akure. Ekue was nothing more than a generic name for Eastern Yoruba land and sometimes the whole of the Yoruba interior, and parallels the term Ekue, which is a generic term for coastal Yoruba lands. There are only scattered sources on this population, and the book addresses this gap in research. Ekue stemmed from the combination of political and commercial domination. Most soldiers fought part-time and spent many days in trade, as much as traders also periodically took the field or had private militias fighting on its behalf. The book pays great attention to the organization of Ekue and the role of senior traders and elders as the Balekale or the Olotu, which translates as the consul or the governor. The overlap of trade and politics is clear in the colonies coming under direct supervision of Edo chiefs in the capital, like the king, the crown king, the queen mother, as well as retired successful traders converting their trade wealth into political power by seeking offices after they've retired to Benin. The relationship of the book to wider literature is discussed mainly in the introduction. The book arising from the African diaspora are reasonably fully addressed. The book is patterned after existing works on commercial diasporas in Africa, popularized in the 1960s and 70s by scholars such as Abner Cohen, Philip Cotton, Madi Adamu, Ivor Wilkes, Polly Hill, Paul Lovejoy, just to mention Phil. These scholars imagined a trade diaspora straddling the political field. The Ekue was more than a commercial diaspora. It also represented an imperial system, which for me, whereby the state and its agents directed not just commerce, but also politics. As a result, Benin expansion or Benin operations in Eastern Yoruba land reminds me of what Britain did with the Royal Niger Company, the consuls, the missionaries, and the envoys in the 19th century. A diaspora occupies the ambiguous position of being an extension of the homeland, yet keeping it at arm's length if this will better relationships with the host. A diaspora therefore straddles two societies, wanting to be part of both while seeking neutrality and autonomy from both as well. This is clear in Ekue living in concentrated quarters apart from the whole society, seeking monopoly of selected trade products, having an executive council cum court to administer the community independent of local laws, and restricting, as the author argues, marriages between the host communities and members of Edos. And therefore, Ekue parallels such diasporas in Africa as the Hausa, the Igbo, the Jula, just to mention again, few. The book agrees with scholars who have only made casual reference to Edo imperialism in northeast Yoruba land, that the role of trade and merchants in the expansion of Benin's power and influence and governance of its foreign colonies made it a gentler, or what Biodun added in our terms as benevolent or pleasant imperialism. And this is to separate Benin operations from later activities by Ibadan, Ilorin, Oyo, Nupe, and so on. But was Benin rule indeed pleasant, or was it because its heydays was in the distant past, largely in the 16th and 17th century, there at an era poorly documented in African history, that people who says Edo imperialism as pleasant had largely forgotten what happened in the distant past. Hence, more is known of the Ibadan and Ilorin operations which occurred after 1840, and those longing for Benin days never lived it. It reminds me of Nigeria of the 1980s and 1990s, when several people wished Britain would return to recolonize Nigeria. This was not Britain was better, but simply because the military appeared worse. Memories of British rule had become foggy, and many of those who experienced British rule were dead. The book is a rich text, supported by a great deal of research based on a wide range of source materials, including many interviews collected by the author from second and third generation Ekue in Eastern Yoruba land and Benin, archival documents in Nigeria and the UK, and oral traditions as preserved in published local histories and collected in authors' fieldwork. The richest source, I will argue, and what is neglected by scholars, including the interviews or the research notes by Richard Bradbury in the 1950s and 60s. Thematically, the book is given unity by its concentration on the central issues of the impact of the expansion of state, politically and economically across centuries and amid pre-colonial, colonial, and post-colonial social, political, and economic formations. While Benin was not opposed to slavery, which was conceived as a penalty for war prisoners and offenders, as well as a source of economic productivity, it was also reluctant to embrace the slave trade with Europeans. In 1540, as the author argues, Benin passed a law banning the sale of male captives to Europeans. Was this to conserve men for the army, for local production, the inability to recruit enough captives for sale, or was this Benin's small contribution to what African scholars now refer to as the partial perspective on the abolitionist crusade? In other words, by refusing or by limiting the number of captives sold outside Benin, was Benin essentially gradually rejecting the slave trade and therefore working towards what later became abolitionism in the 19th century. Is that me? The book is divided, and I'm trying to round up right now. The book is divided into 5 chapters.
Thank you.
The introduction, as I've said, examines the historiography on the diaspora and diasporic studies, with a focus on the origins of Ekue. Chapter 1 identifies the sources of population export abroad, disagreements over chieftaincy contests, fugitives from law, flight from injustice and oppression, princes living to settle elsewhere, and the author mentions Ogoga, Oshemawe, Obi of Onitsha, aggrieved parties going abroad, traders operating abroad and settling down in Ekiti, political and dynastic relations, and the posting of Benin envoys into the colonies. Chapter 2 to 4, and that's the main text, main source of the book, focus on the commercial and military routes of Ekue, the organization of trade by members, Benin participation in the Atlantic slave trade, linkages between Benin trade, politics, and imperialism, and the socio-political and economic operations of members through the 19th century. Chapter 2, covering the period 1480s to 1750, details Benin imperial wars, starting with Iwari in the 15th century, and the dispersal of Benin warriors, consuls, and traders to the colonies. Commerce entered a new phase with the development of European trade. Products such as ivory, leopard skin, redwood, cotton products came slowly, so Edo traders found out into the colonies, while adventurers such as Ogoga settled in eastern Yoruba forest, like Ikere and others at Ipele, hunting for elephants to sell the tusk.
Yes,
Trade was controlled by the Ekenegbo, that is forest traders, a group of traders operating under royal license. And again, this reminds me of the early foundations of the Royal Niger Company. The author provides a lengthy list of traders involved in this operation, the overlap of commerce and politics, and the engagement and disengagement between Edo diaspora and their host. Chapter 3 addresses connections between Benin's expansion and the slave trade. This phase coincides with nearly 2 centuries of political and economic decay within Benin. During the decay, Benin seemingly lost control of its colonies, or at least had its influence weakened, not because of local resistance, but much more due to internal crisis within Benin. As this contributor has argued elsewhere, the decay, initially fueled by poor trade and accentuated by palace intrigues and civil wars, saw Benin lose control of its main trade port, Arogbo on the Niger River, Benin River, not the one in Ondo State, around 1700, after which European traders largely left for Ouidah, the Gold Coast, and Warri and places further east in the Bight of Biafra. The other point, unfortunately skipped by the book, was that Benin suffered from being a landlocked state. European trade saw the rise of coastal states and trade brokers, mostly Ijaw and Ishekiri. These people had upper edge the riverine port at Arogbo, and Benin's push to gain control of the port led to conflicts and trade losses. The same happened in the West, where Benin
Continue.
Is that for me?
Yes, but please round up, please. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, okay, thank you so much. I will in just 2 minutes. Chapter 4 takes on Benin imperial resurgence in the 19th century after near 2 centuries of political and economic decay. The author dates the resurgence to around 1816, 1818, with attacks first on Ute, then Akure and Ikititan to the north. I wish the author had spent more time considering the impact of the jihad and its impact on Benin. It's partly dictated by a desire to push back Sokoto encroachment, but the civil war had weakened Benin that by 1850 it had lost nearly all its colonies in eastern Yorubaland. The chapter shows that Benin operators, and again some names, Ezomo, Ozaro Giagbo, Oyodo, Imadiyi, Igareba, Okishi, Obakpolo, and so on, were privateers, each raiding no longer for Benin, but for themselves. The chapter is rich in detailing the life stories and semi-biographies of leading Edo men and the revolving door between the diaspora and the periphery. Let me pick on a point in this chapter. The author spent some time discussing the Ute factor, whether it was Benin or Owo, or an independent entity. He submits that Ute belonged to Benin, a personal fief of the Edaiken or the Crown Prince. But this reviewer will argue that Ute was also a frontier community with multiple alliances, supporting every neighbor while playing one against the other. The last chapter captures the rise of Benin imperialism, Nigerian ethnic party politics, and the decline of Benin political empire and the vibrancy of Edo diaspora in the Northeast. British imperialism encouraged defiance in the colonies against Benin Rouge, abolished the slave trade, ended the payment of tributes. Without political support from Benin, Edo Ekue became a minority group, and the pressure to disconnect from Benin intensified with the expansion of ethnic party politics, as clear in the willingness to drop symbols of Edo identity, names, religion, religious rituals, and body marks. Let me just stop there and I can take up more questions later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ojo. Okay, we will go to our next. So please note the questions down from the panelists, and then we'll have a time of response from the author. The next panelist that we will go to is Oraoluwa Oguntomise from University of Ilesha. Please take it away.
All right, can you come and sit here so that okay, are you able to camera?
The camera is moving. Put it here for the audio. Just leave it here.
Yeah. Professor Ojo, can you hear him?
Can you hear me?
Me?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
All right. My name is Uyilawa from the University of Ilesha. I've read the book. It's very rich. It's similar to my PhD thesis, but I work on Benin relations from 1914 to 1960. The book discusses so many areas, particularly the Eastern Yoruba land and Benin, the interaction over the years. Let's start from the Benin imperialism and trade. That's chapter 1. Benin imperialism and trade with the northeastern Yoruba territory before the coming of the Europeans. It was during the reign of Uyilawa the Great that Benin started moving from their home country into the eastern Yoruba land, particularly Ekiti. That's my focus. First, what led to this migration? In the book, the author discovered that the policy of the Uyilawa led so many dissatisfied Benin traders to move from Benin into the eastern Yoruba land. Number one, they moved to discover more opportunities. Second, to find more trades in the eastern Yoruba land. And number two, to have access to the interior part of the Yoruba land. By 1440, when they began to expand into the eastern Yoruba, to expand their search for raw materials, trade opportunities, and expand their trade. It was during this time that the economic interest in the Ekere, began to show. During this period, most of the dissidents were not satisfied with the reign and policy of Uyilawa. They moved to Ekere some began to hunt for elephant tusk. Because at that time, elephant tusk was a very important trade in Benin. That is why the story of Ogoga coming to Ikere, and then with the support of the indigenous Ikere, they imposed their rulership over the Ikere of Ikere. When I traveled to Ikere to discuss with the chiefs, I met a strong I think they were dissatisfied for me to interview them. At that time, there was a crisis between the Uga and Ulukere at that time. But I discovered that the Ulukere was the indigenous person, inhabitant of Ikere, and Uga was said to be a Benin migrant. In another literature that I read, he was said to be a prince. But later, some discovered that it was just an ordinary hunter that settled at Ugo or Gaga. And he was able to lord his power over the Olukere. And he was being the hubber and the Olukere being his spiritual head. Still on chapter 1, I brought a question. What led to the frequent Benin conquest in Akure? And in my own opinion, I discovered that Benin incursion into Akure is economical because they did not form a colony in Akure. Their main is to just trade. Same thing in the Kiti areas. Because in Ado, they have a conflict with Ado, but they did not establish a colony in Ado Ekiti. Same with Ikere. You just suppress the rebellious leadership in Ikere, in Ado, in Ogotun, also in Ado Babu Ekiti. Was in my research, I discovered that the wage war around the Ado, Ogotun, and some towns and villages around the Ekitis. In chapter 2, the Benin migrants in the eastern Yoruba settled and transformed themselves as Edemeku or Ado Akure. After the war between Ekiti and Benin, the Benin traders began to settle down in these areas. Like I said, the Ekitis did not believe that they were conquered or they were subjugated by Benin. What they said is that they were forced to not to expand their territories. For instance, in Ado Ekiti, the Benin wage war not to curb the excess of Ado Ekiti, not to expand beyond their territory, because Ado was moving, developing, and Ekiti was having an issue with Ado. So in order to have this free of trade between Benin and Ikere and other parts of Ekiti, so they have to cut the excess of Ado Ekiti. So that's what led to the frequent raids in the area. So they assumed the role of middlemen and brought European goods to the Eastern Yoruba land. The Balikales are Benin migrants and traders whose interest is to protect Benin economic interests in the northeastern Yoruba, especially Ekiti. The Balikales are also traders themselves. And I think they established in order to protect Benin interest in the eastern Yoruba land, because in order to have a free flow of trade and commerce, the Bale Kale was appointed in order to oversee the interest, in order to protect their political interests in the eastern Yoruba land. I draw a question for the author. Number one, Tommy. Oh. All right. Oh. Ah. Number one, the author mentioned that Benin makes some interaction with some Ijebu areas. It did not mention some of these Ijebu areas. Page. I'll wait for the page. Okay. I'll be after the discussion. That's all for now. That's all for now.
Thank you very much, for good to listen. Okay, we'll go to our next respondent, our next panelist, Dr. Uyilawa Oyarinu.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm not going to dwell on the issues spoken on specifically. I'll look at some thematic areas of the book where I'll consider things like character development of the book, writing style, pacing and structure. I'm probably going to consider the emotional impact that resonates from reading. I'm also going to look at, I'm going to compare it to a number of work that is attributed to the central theme of the book and differences from books in the thematic area of the work. I'm going to consider a number of strengths of the book and look at very key weaknesses. Yeah, and also consider the target audience that the book appeals to. So first, in terms of character development, I said the book focuses more on communities and cultural narratives than on individual characters, which is unique and appealing to the work. However, the book does not provide rich ethnographic insights into the lives and experiences of the Ekue people, which can be analyzed in terms of community characters or collective identities rather than conventional protagonists. Community as a character, the book looked at collective identity, cultural resilience, transformative journey of the Ekue diaspora. And there were a number of individual narratives, although the focus of the book was not on individual narratives, but examples were drawn from individual narratives. The book had relatable experience based on diverse perspective. The Ekue, for example, emerged as a complex and relatable collective and adaptable diaspora experience. The transformative arc and the adaptability as they navigate the diaspora experience. Writing style. The book explores several central themes that illuminate the complexity of identity, cultural continuity, and the impact of historical events on ethnic groups. Here are some of the themes and messages presented in the book. A number of them have been mentioned, but I'll mention this. Cultural continuity and change, identity formation in diaspora, impact of colonialism and globalization, resilience and community solidarity, the role of memory and oral tradition. This particularly appealed to me. Then, in terms of pacing and structure, the work looked at chronological progression from 1485 to 1995, which I found interesting because since this work is in the area of ethnography and history, I was expecting that there will be a connection to the recent reality of the Ekue, but the work unfortunately terminated in 1995, which I believe would open further research for others who might consider working in that area. I don't know if it was looking at the structure, chapter organization has been discussed extensively. The narrative style. The work combines scholarly rigor with an engaging tone, making the book appealing to both academic and general audience. I have to state here that the language that was used cuts across both people in academic and those who might just be interested in the history of the Ekue. Then emotional impact. There were personal narrative and oral histories. The theme of resilience and adaptation, cultural practices and emotional connection. Places where festivals were mentioned, the tradition of the people were mentioned, and how it connects to their diaspora was extensively discussed. Then we looked at the book also considered exploration of identity and belonging, and the use of reflective language, which cut across in the work. The book can be compared to Professor Tony Falola's The Yoruba Diaspora in the Atlantic World. But there are differences in this work and Professor Tony Falola's work. While Professor Tony Falola's work considered different communities, the book pursued micro-history by focusing extensively on the history of Ekue people. Let me skip the next and move to the adherence to and subversion of genre from the conventional works in this area. So I said the book adheres to several conventions of ethnographic writing, such as the use of field work, personal narratives, and thematic exploration of cultural practices. For example, the book gave a detailed description of cultural practices such as festivals and communal gatherings, reflects on adherence to ethnographic tradition of immersing oneself in the community being studied. Looking at the strength of the work is rich in ethnographic detail, and it has a comprehensive historical context. The weakness, we said complexity. I said complexity of structure, which might be slightly confusing for readers who are not historians or sociologists. I also looked at I also considered limited exploration of contemporary issues, which I mentioned earlier. Then the target audience, the work definitely appeals to academic and scholarly audience, especially students and researchers in African studies, ethnographers and anthropologists, individuals interested in cultural heritage, educators, and policymakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those excellent remarks. And I hope you're noting all the questions. And And the last speaker will be me, myself, Abosede George from Barnum College and Columbia University. And first of all, I just want to say congratulations to Dr. Usuanlele on the publication of this fascinating study. And thank you also to the LSA for this author meets critics session and these series that give us opportunities to engage with new works that are important, that are of importance to our field and this location. I came to this work as someone who did not know about the Edo Ekue before. And the more I read, the more I could see how little I knew about the history of Edo in general, and one of the most significant empires in West Africa. The Benin Empire is on our lips a lot these days. In my circles, due to the politics of art repatriation. Indeed, just this week, there was a major agreement, I think, with the Netherlands on some of its holdings of Benin heritage and record. But as Dr. Usuanlele's career has shown, and as we see further in this book, there's a vast breadth and complexity to the Edo people's history and to Benin history that is both historical and spatial. Indeed, this book is about the extension of the Benin Empire and its history into the towns and polities of northeastern Yoruba land over the course of 500 years, following the paths through the forest that were laid by its or one of its diasporas, the Edone Ekwe. That might be one of my first questions. To what extent is this book a book about the singular imperial diaspora into Yoruba land, or is the Edone Ekwe one of several Benin diasporas that we can start looking into and that may be less known at this time? I came to this book, as I said, as someone with a passing knowledge of Benin history, enough to teach a basic African history class, but as someone with also a strong interest in social history, the history of the African diaspora and Lagos studies. And it's through these three lenses that I was really engaging in dialogue with the book to think about what it is bringing to social history, African diaspora studies, and Lagos studies. In terms of diaspora studies, one of the things I was thinking about was how many people does it take to make a diaspora? What is the volume of population migration or mass movement, whether voluntary or involuntary, to constitute a diaspora? We know from Lagos history that part of the origin stories of Lagos's political elites is linked to Benin. But there is also in Lagos history a division between the history of its political elites and the history of its peoples. So suggesting a kind of even a numerical, quantitative division. So what is the kind of scale of mass movement that we should be thinking about when we want to characterize a population movement as a diaspora? I'm going to come back to this question later. One of the major contributions of the book that has already been mentioned, but I just want to harp on it again, is the way that it seamlessly spans the three classical temporal blocks of African history, which are one, the long pre-encounter with Europe, the transformative century of European imperialism, and the decades since the emergence of independent nation states in Africa. So the book seamlessly takes us through these three major epochs. In exactly 200 pages, we are whisked at a steady pace, using very elegant prose, as my colleague just said, through almost 500 years of history. I was also impressed by how much actual historical detail was packed into this efficient space. And I remember thinking that I was learning as much about Eastern Yoruba land as I was learning about the Edo Ekue in these 200 pages. Using a mixed methods approach, which includes documentary archives, literary texts, oral sources, monarchical records, and even photographs, Usuanlele is able to track the fortunes of the Edo Ekwe alongside the changing political history of the Benin Empire, the expanding British colony, and even the evolving Nigerian Federal Republic. Reflecting on the question of 500 years of history, 500 years of the history of the Edo Ekwe prompts me to ask, is this still a diaspora? I would like you perhaps to expand on your arguments about what does it take besides the factor of time or the passive factor of time to actively make a diaspora. So my first question about diasporas had to do with scale of population, how big of a movement. The second question is, besides the passage of time, does the formation of diaspora require something other than the kind of a historical movement, right? What transforms a movement into a diaspora? And then reflecting on the long time span of the book, the 500 years, what transforms the diaspora into something else? Is there other changes over time that emerge beyond the concept of diaspora? One of the things that's come up is what kind of diaspora were the Edo Ekwe? We've mentioned the trading diasporas, but I also saw a warring diaspora. I also saw a slaving diaspora. And these occupational framings as traders, warriors, or slavers are arguably part of the contribution of African studies to African diaspora studies, two fields that have historically been totally distinct. Where in African diaspora studies, the label of diasporas was often associated with racial, ethnic, or cultural features. African scholars countered by proposing that economic functions, such as trading, could also be a lens for characterizing a diasporic community, or even the foundation for forming one. The chapters of the book I see as being kind of layered and layering these various modes of thinking about diaspora. The initial chapter introduces us to the Edo Ekwe as a cultural group. The second chapter introduces the concept of them as a trading group, as trading emissaries of Imperial Benin, identified with the Edo state, its cultures, its ways, and its leaders. The third chapter, Usuanlele explores the role of the Edo Ekwe in the European slave trade business and the introduction of this slaving business into northeastern Yoruba land, along with the consequences for local Yoruba communities, their relationships with the Benin Empire and with each other. The fourth chapter takes us into the emergence of Edo Ekwe as warriors, warlords, and mercenaries within the context of the 19th century Yoruba Wars, which concluded about the same time as the pacification of Benin. The end of the 19th century saw this bight of Benin region effectively subordinated under new imperial powers from Europe through their regional clients and allies in Sierra Leone and Lagos. By the end of the European imperial era in the mid-20th century and the rise of the Nigerian nation state, with its new laws of citizenship and indigeneity, the book brings us up to the 20th century reality where Edo Ekwe operate as cultural and political minorities in Yoruba majority regions, trying to navigate the politics of multiple belonging, multiple languages and heritages, and the ways in which these multiplicities consolidate into multiplied exclusions. from both the ancient homeland of Benin and the modern home states of Eastern Yoruba land. So not only do the chapters, in my view, take this kind of layered cake approach to the characterization of Edo and Ekwe, which is to say that they are not an X or a Y diaspora, but various things at various times and everything all at once. It's complex. This layering method directly challenges the binary view of diasporas as either racial, ethnic, and cultural, or as occupational. Historically, these elements are clearly deeply entangled. While the book doesn't quite offer a new label, a new label or a new name for this way of thinking about layered diasporas, I think it points us by illustration towards imagining new language. There are many very interesting details about climate and why did the Edo Ekwe end up in northeastern Yoruba land rather than southeastern, which I would encourage readers to look into. It's very interesting. But then also this discussion of the role of the slave trade, the European slave trade, in the relationship between the Edo Ekwe and their Yoruba neighbors. It was interesting to learn that Owo was the only town in the region before the 19th century that had a history of slavery, and that this was also the town that was closest to the borders of the Benin Kingdom. Citing Dr. Ojo, who's also on the screen, I think, or who it was, Usuanlele argues that, he points out that slavery was not a major part of Yoruba economies until the 1800s. And this, for me, raised one of the classic questions in the history of the African diaspora and especially Atlantic slavery. Did the Atlantic slave trade lead to the growth of slavery in Africa? If we want to scale it down to the level of the book's interest, did the Benin slave trading lead to the growth of slavery in Yoruba land? These are difficult questions that Dr. Usuanlele is opening up, I think. And while there's a long history of debating these questions and their stakes in the African diaspora, it is fascinating and important to open them up in this context as well. Just a little bit more. It's interesting that there are several mentions of individuals and families in the book that were of some kind of mixed descent, whether Edo and Yoruba or Ijos, etc. And one of the questions I was thinking was that over time, what makes Edo Edo? Here, the role of the author in dictating how we should understand these individuals and their families becomes important. The imposition of a singular identity, even where there is mixture. What kinds of theoretical deliberations led to these conclusions that this study is consistently, despite these variations, about an Edo diaspora? Finally, from a social history standpoint, I have to say that I noted several provocative, I would call them absent presences, which is to say that there is a presence in the text that we know is there, but that is perhaps under-examined in the analysis. So the presence of women as wives, as laborers, as enslaved people, the presence of what is called followers, and also the presence of the enslaved. These are mentioned several times, and so we know that they are there. But as part of the analysis of the experience of the Edo diaspora, or the historical evolution of the Edo diaspora, they're not really brought in. What difference does it make that there was social stratification? What difference does it make that there were a large numbers of followers and women and enslaved? Are they also part of the Edo Ekwe history, or is the Edo Ekwe history really about Edo elites. This might be a function of the monarchical grounding, the grounding of monarchical sources of the methodology. They will tend to reflect the experience of monarchs and the elites. So I wanted to know if there were happening with these volumes of followers and enslaved and wives and others. So while the monarchical and chiefly records, especially of a long-standing empire like the Benin Kingdom, offers us precious long durée records, could they also be costing us in terms of a broad understanding of social life and historical change? The book, I think, was, as I already said, was rich, dense, engaging, and I think it said what it had to say, not too much. So thank you very much, Dr. Uyilawa.
Thank you so much. Is Professor Dr. Komusa, did he make it online? Okay.
Okay, we have exactly 23 minutes left for this session. So in the interest of giving the author time to respond.
I said Dr. Komusa is online.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, okay. So let's take it away. But please let us keep to 15 minutes maximum. Thank you. So our next speaker is Dr. Frank Ikomosa from the University of Benin. The floor is yours, please. Thank you. Who's on the chat?
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Okay. Good. Good afternoon from here.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, I've been trying to join. It's a little bit difficult. Yes. First, I'd like to commend the author for the job, for the thorough research done in this book. It talks about diasporas with particular reference to Ekue in northeast Yoruba areas. Now, let me start by saying that Ekue, what we mean, what the author means by Ekue. Ekue is, I would say, is 15th century of Benin pronunciation of Akure. So it talks about the migration of Benin, from Benin, from the Benin Kingdom to Akure, and they settled there. Subsequently, some of them returned, and they returned with their dependents. They returned with their family and later settled in Benin. They are known, those groups are known, that group is known as Ekue. However, beyond that, there are also some who remained in northeast area, northeast Yoruba area, who remained there, probably because of the opportunities the area provided. And that group is also known as Ekue. So collectively, it means the returnee and their family, and those who remained in northeast Yoruba area and their family. they have a common identity, which the author highlighted. They have a common identity. One, though they speak Bini, but interspersed, they mixed it with Yoruba. In other words, they cannot speak Bini completely. They mixed it, they interspersed their Bini with Yoruba. Number two, they have their names are not, they have Yoruba names, such as Sobie, Wosheni, Akbata, Ujo, you know. Even when they have, some of them have Benin name, they still have these Yoruba names. Number three, many of them are engaged in commercial activities. So they were what we could call traders and craftsmen. That is their identity. Now, the issue is why Northeast Yoruba territories? Why Northeast? When we talk about diasporas, why Northeast? We could see that from what the author says, the boundary was very flexible, it's fluid. There was no rigid, there was no definite what you could call rigid boundaries between the old Benin Kingdom and this Northeast Yoruba area. So the fluidity was there, free movement. This allows people, Benin, especially from Benin, known as Ekue today, to move to these areas, to go out for trade and to practice their craft, because some of them were craftsmen. Now, beyond that, there were also affinity, traditional affinity, according to the author. Some of them maintain dynastic relationship, monarchical relationship. There were some Yoruba politics, traditional rulers in Northeast, whose relations were in Benin. So they used that opportunity. There was that relationship. There was that cordial relationship because of that traditional affinity. Now, that was those were the factors that facilitated movement during the pre-colonial period. In addition to trade, you know, many of them were involved in long distance trade, to the extent that they subsequently founded the Ekengbo Trading Association. Now, the issue is, why were these Benin migrants, why were they able to settle down in Northeast? I hope I'm still with the panel.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, we are together.
Okay. Why were they able to settle down? What was the alluring factors that they were able to settle down in part of Yoruba area territories, this so referred to as Northeast here? There's no doubt that the area provided especially during the trade, you know, the areas they produced some of the commodities that were needed, which could not be obtained within a short period. So you have to stay there. So Benin relations, that relationship I said earlier on, that affinity was there. So they were received. They were able to settle down and practice and carry out their trade. That is number one. Number two was that they also had the craft, the trade that were needed in this Northeast. As the author rightly mentioned, many of them some of them, the migrants, were craftsmen, you know, professionals who have trade, that's as blacksmith, that's as leather workers, etc. So these trade were needed. Their products were needed in Northeast. So they allow them to settle down, But again, you cannot also rule out the role traditional monarchical system in Benin, which provided a sort of a security for this migrant. And going by the name of coming from Benin Kingdom was enough, for any host community to receive the migrant because of, they are from Benin Kingdom. So we need to respect them. We need to receive them. That was there. However, in the course of their stay, the Edonekwe, the Benin, now referred to as Edonekwe, also did not do much to integrate into the society, into the host society. For example, the trading association they formed, they had the Usuanlele, they have later, subsequently, they have what he referred to as Balikale, but I don't know whether that is a Benin name. They were referring their disputes. Instead of referring their disputes to the local authorities, the host communities, authorities, traditional, they were referring their disputes, their disagreement to these Usuanlele and Balikale, who were, of course, appointed from Benin. That was a source of conflict. Number two, another factors that would have facilitated, that would have promoted integration and cooperation between them was marriage. It appears the Edonekwe were very discriminatory against their host women because of certain reasons. We were talking about trust and loyalty. So that again would have promoted cooperation and integrate. They would have fully integrated into the society. Then what did this host community, Ekue, and what did they do? He said that yes, to bring them under control, there was a policy that you must bury, before you bury the dead amongst the Edonekwe, you must seek permission of the traditional authority. I think that was one of the measures introduced by the host community to bring the Edonekwe under some level of control. Then he talked about the colonial authorities and all that. It finally subordinated the Edonekwe into the authorities of colonial rule and the authorities of the native authority in Ekue. Their trade suffered because they were now expected to divide their trade towards Lagos, which hitherto before now was going to Benin. They suffer some losses in that aspect. Two, they were now subordinated into the native authority administration of Ekue. Number three, the profit, of course, that affected their profit, even when they were expecting that with the emergence of the later installation or restoration of the monarchy would enhance or ensure that their status remain in Northeast, but that didn't work. It didn't work because colonial authority, the monarchy was now subordinate to the colonial authority. Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Please, yes, hello.
I hope I'm still with you.
You are, but
can I still go on?
No, please be wrapping up. Please be wrapping up. 2 minutes.
Okay. Yes, and now some of them played a prominent role in the whether spiritually or financial, in the restoration of the monarchy. That when the monarchy were restored, the Oba actually invited some of them, advised them to relocate to Benin, coupled with the colonial policies, unfriendly policies in Yoruba area that now subordinated them, incorporated them into native Yoruba, the native authority in Akure and other areas. So some of them came back. But as at the time they came, some of them didn't have house building in Benin, and building became commercialized and expensive. They couldn't. Schools only started in Benin about in 1901 and 1902 when government and the I think Methodist Church respectively came into. So schools were not easily available. The only area they could obtain land, that is outskirts of Benin, these schools were not available and some other facilities were not also there. So they find it difficult. And some of them went back. Those who went back are still Ekue, and they are in Yoruba area today. So that was what existed till ReadersUsuanlele came in, and ReadersUsuanlele just advised them, look, you are wherever you are should be your home. Respect constituted authorities and submit yourself to the local authority and live amongst them. I think that is where
We lost you. Just allow him to wrap.